Hey, DawgNation, my name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. Really excited about today's show. This is the day we reveal all the details of our DawgNation invasion to Charlotte. Invite you to be with us for that. We'll do that coming up in a couple of minutes' time. Also, special guest on the program, someone we haven't had in quite some time. We'll look forward to speaking to him. I'll tell you more about that coming up in a moment. There are narratives that Kirby Smart seems to enjoy squashing. We'll talk about that on the show. Some interesting lists in terms of how UGA is perceived as we head towards the upcoming season. A lot to cover. We'll do it all over the course of the next few minutes. Glad to have you with us as we do. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Harrah's Cherokee Resort. Find us online at Caesars.com/Harrah's-Cherokee.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Kirby Smart is like a lot of coaches in that he seems to have a little bit of a love-hate relationship with the media. You know, at times Smart would even be, I think, probably one to say that he doesn't very much pay attention to what's out there in the media. He kind of ignores that. Most coaches seem to kind of view that as an important part of their job, not paying too much attention to what blowhards in front of a microphone like me are saying or what folks are writing. They try to keep, blinders on and focused on the job at hand. And obviously, Kirby Smart's no different. However, there are so many examples, though, over the course of time in which Smart seems to do something that seems to tip off some sort of awareness of the narratives that are out there. And without acknowledging what the media may be saying, without acknowledging what the commonality of fans might be saying, there are things that Smart does that seems to be both an indication that he knows what people are talking about and sometimes a little bit of a rebuke for things that he thinks might be wrong. There was potentially an example of that yesterday, and before I show this to you and kind of move on, let me just say this. It's going to be a really fun day on the show. We're going to welcome back a guest that we haven't had in quite some time. Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, going to be with us here in just a little bit. Looking forward to speaking to Tony on the program today. That's going to be a ton of fun. We're also a couple of minutes away from the big unveiling of all the specific details of our DawgNation invasion to Charlotte for the season opener against Clemson. We'll even invite you on today's show to go ahead and sign up to be a part of that. A lot of different options available for you, so we'll tell you about that coming up here in just a little bit of time, so please stick with us for the next few minutes. This is going to be a really big show. Now back to the topic at hand. As I said before, Smart likes to kind of push back against narrative sometimes. Example of that from yesterday, and this is one of those things that I love about the SEC because sometimes relatively benign messages from programs, from coaches, from entities in this league can ignite a lot of chatter. And if you're not super plugged into what's going on, this is one of those things where if you kind of know, you know, and sometimes if you don't know, you have no idea what's going on. But sometimes relatively benign messages can set off a lot of chatter. I'll show you this yesterday. A tweet from Georgia coach Kirby Smart who says, "Congratulations to our academic players of the week." And you see Nazir Stackhouse there. Obviously, we're happy for Nazir and Kamari Lassiter. And you also see Eric Gilbert on there as well. Now, it didn't take very long for many Georgia fans to kind of view this as Georgia kind of spiking the football a little bit. That for Georgia, who recently won the recruitment for Eric Gilbert coming out of the transfer portal from LSU, to name him as Academic Player of the Week so quick into his Georgia tenure was kind of sort of viewed as a little bit of a spiking the football, especially given the fact that there were, let's face it, lots of rumors out there that somehow, some way, that Eric Gilbert had academic issues that kept him from having all the choices fully available to him. Remember at one point in time he was committed to transfer to Florida. That didn't quite work out, and a lot of Florida fans also noticed this yesterday, much the same way that Georgia fans kind of noticed that it almost had the appearance of a little bit of trolling to Florida, a little bit of trolling to some of those rival fan bases who had said what I think apparently turned out to be a false narrative about Gilbert and his academics. Naming Gilbert Academic Player of the Week was a little bit, almost in the eyes of so many people, a little bit of a rebuke against those who had kind of talked about the ways in which Gilbert's academic situation might be working out. And we said on the show at the time that some of this had the whiff of being really unfair because a lot of the people who were kind of spouting off about what they thought they knew about Gilbert's grades had not seen the transcript, we presume, had not been fully made aware of everything that might be going on with him academically. But to see Gilbert now at Georgia, when at one point in time he was thought to be going to Florida and a potential replacement for a guy like Kyle Pitts, this is just the kind of thing that kind of erupts all over again yesterday on the basis of this tweet. And as a reminder of just how much something like this potentially stings for Florida fans, let me let you go back and hear Mark Long, covers the Gators for the Associated Press. He was a guest of mine on SEC Country Live a couple of weeks ago, and he talked at the time about just how much it was a little bit of a punch to the gut, a little bit of a tough pill to swallow, whatever analogy you're more comfortable using, that when Georgia swooped in and got Gilbert away from the Gators, and some of the folks there at Florida were left to kind of use academics as an excuse for all of that. This is Mark Long from the Associated Press.
Yeah, it was pretty stunning. That it's one thing if the guy's going to transfer or decommit because he can't get in, and that was at least the talk was that, or the thought process was he wasn't going to be able to get into school. And we understand, everybody understands that Florida, is a pretty high academic standard, and they've turned some guys away who end up playing other places in the SEC or around the country. But you don't expect. It's not like Georgia is Ole Miss. In terms of academics, when you lose a guy and then he ends up at your arch rival, a school that's equally, it's on equal footing academically, then you start scratching your head, going, "What went wrong? Where what was this?" So if the guy ended up at a JUCO, or he ended up at University of Miami, or he ends up at Florida State, or even Ole Miss, you probably go, "Okay, we get that." But to end up at Georgia, it's the two of the best academic institutions in the SEC, Florida and Georgia, and most people believe that they're on par with each other. So I think Florida fans are scratching their head and going, where did somebody screw this up?
So listen, if you watched all this play out yesterday, as minor as it was, I think you were left to believe that, boy, it certainly seems like Kirby Smart may have been aware of that narrative, and to see Gilbert honored by Georgia so quickly in his tenure there as a Dog sort of felt like to some a little bit of a twisting of the knife by UGA and Kirby Smart in particular in regards to all that you just heard Mark Long explain. But that alone is not the only reason why I bring this up, because here, if you're a Georgia fan, is I think what you need to be hoping right now, that much the same way that Kirby Smart is really good at refuting narratives, maybe the Eric Gilbert is an example of that, there is another narrative that floats out there that persists, it doesn't go away. And if you're a UGA fan, I think you ought to be really excited about, much the same way that Kirby Smart has squashed other false narratives in the past, that he may be ready to squash this false narrative here in the very near future. We've seen a lot of these rankings come out this year, and it's this way every single year, of who's the top coach in college football and where does your guy rank in all of this. And actually, Bill Bender from the Sporting News, the latest to come out with his list on this. We're actually going to have Bill on SEC Country Live later on this afternoon, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the SEC Country video channels. We'll talk to him about the list that he put together, but there was some attention given yesterday to the fact that Kirby Smart only ranks 7th on Bill Bender's list, behind Ryan Day at Ohio State, Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, Brian Kelly at Notre Dame, Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma, and of course Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban, recent national champion coaches. Kirby ahead, one spot of Dan Mullen from Florida, of course, Matt Campbell from Iowa State, and Mac Brown from UNC. And what a lot of Georgia fans say in response to this is, hold on, look at Kirby Smart's record against all the guys who are ranked ahead of him or ranked right there in the top 10. He's beaten Dan Mullen in 2017, 2018, 2019. He's beaten Jimbo Fisher to go back to the 2018 season. Beat Brian Kelly twice, once in 2017, once in 2019. Beat Lincoln Riley in the Rose Bowl to conclude the 2017 season. That somehow Kirby Smart's only 7th on this list, but a lot of the coaches in the top 10 of this list, Smart has great success against. And when you think about the logic of that based on the fact that Smart's beaten these top 10 coaches, that some Georgia fans assume that he might ought to rank a little higher on this list, I think the only thing that you can conclude here is that no matter what Smart has done against these other top 10 level coaches, that there is this narrative that persists with him that until the offense fully evolves, until Georgia starts to resemble a little bit more for what, these offensive-minded coaches like Ryan Day or like Lincoln Riley or programs that have very successful offenses like Dabo Swinney and Nick Saban, until Georgia's offense looks like those programs look, there are going to be some doubts about Kirby Smart as a coach, which is not to say that being ranked 7th out of 130 coaches is an insult, but being only 7th when you've had so much success against the other top 10 guys, it seems to be a little bit of what I think some Georgia fans view as a false narrative against Kirby Smart. And to give you a little bit more evidence of this, Paul Feinbaum was on WJOX a couple of months ago. That's a Birmingham sports radio station. He was interviewed by the host there, and he kind of brought to voice what I think some people sort of say is that no matter how many wins that Kirby Smart's collected so far at Georgia, there are still just some doubts about how good of a coach he really is. This is Paul Feinbaum from WJOX.
Kirby Smart just needs to quiet down that conversation out there that he can't that he's not a great on the field coach, and whether he is or isn't, it will continue to be debated. But I think his record is pretty good.
There's a phrase that Feinbaum uses in that clip that I think is pretty interesting. Kirby Smart needs to quiet down the conversation that he's not a very good coach, or in this particular case, as evidenced by the Sporting News, that he's only 7th best out of 130 coaches in the country, when obviously it's the guys ranked ahead of him or making more frequent playoff appearances and winning more national championships. Kirby Smart needs to quiet down that conversation, so says Paul Feinbaum. But here's the thing that I think Georgia fans are aware of, and what this conversation I think is supposed to tip us off to even more, is that quieting down false conversations, squashing false narratives, has actually been something that Kirby Smart's pretty good at doing. Whether it involves Eric Gilbert's academics or any other list of examples you want to cite from the recent past, correcting folks when they're wrong has actually been something that Smart does pretty well. And so now this narrative exists. Many Georgia fans view it to be false there as well, that somehow Smart is deficient as a coach in comparison to guys like Lincoln Riley or Ryan Day or Dabo Swinney or anybody else you want to mention there, Jimbo Fisher, that somehow Smart is deficient in comparison to them. That feels like a false narrative to many, and much the same way Kirby Smart has stomped that stuff out in the past, maybe he'll get a chance to stomp out that narrative here later on this season. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. So glad to have you with us. Big thanks to our friends at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort for making it all possible. Of course, short drive from Atlanta, just 2 hours away. You can enjoy the beautiful mountains of western North Carolina and the fun casino gaming, whether it's the original Harris Cherokee Casino Resort or Harris Cherokee Valley River. They've got that option available for you. Plus, delicious gourmet dining, world-class shopping experiences, a luxurious spa that really, I think, takes relaxation to the next level. It is all available for you at Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. Short drive entertainment options are back there now as well. And, of course, the sportsbook is also open, too. Sports gaming in the mountains of western North Carolina at the Harris Cherokee Casino Resort properties. What could be better than that? Very easy to learn more about this there as well, too. There's a simple website you can go to and get all the details that you need. It's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That's Caesars.com/Harris-Cherokee. That will get you in touch with Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, or you can find out about the Harris Cherokee Valley River property there as well. Great to have them with us as a part of DawgNation Daily here today. All right, it is Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football, coming up in just a couple of moments. Before that, though, I want to go around the doghouse, a little bit different version of Around the Doghouse here today, because as promised, I want to detail and give you some information. Many of you have been asking about this. I've been teasing this for the last couple of days. And today is the day to kind of unveil all of this. DawgNation Invasion is going to return for 2021, and it is going to return in high style for the season opener against Clemson there in Charlotte. First of all, I have to say, I'm very proud of our DawgNation. For those of you watching on video, our DawgNation Invasion logo. I think of Charlotte's a little bit of a NASCAR town, so we've kind of gone NASCAR theme with our DawgNation Invasion logo. This is going to be a big deal. We're able to offer this, I think, at a great rate, thanks to the great sponsors who make all this possible. Our friends from Kroger, our friends from the Finnish Long Drink, our buddies from Merriweather and Tharp, and, of course, R.S. Andrews there as well. These are folks who've been with us for a long time here, and these are folks who are working really hard to make sure all of this is very fun for you. And here's what I'm really proud to say, is we have a couple of different options available. And unfortunately, for both of these options, the space is just somewhat limited, right? We don't have infinite bandwidth on this, but we have worked really hard to make this as big as we can possibly make it and accommodate as many people as we possibly can. So you've really got a couple of different options there as well. You've got a tailgate-only option. So if you're going to be in Charlotte, you can be there. You can enjoy the food and drink that goes along with this. We've got a really cool DawgNation Invasion t-shirt that we've got for you there as well. You know that's going to be a ton of fun. So we have a tailgate-only option if you're already going to be in Charlotte. But for those who want a little bit more than that, we also have a VIP version of our DawgNation Invasion there as well, which includes the tailgate right there close to the beautiful stadium in Charlotte with all the food and beverage that goes along with that, and the t-shirt for that there as well. You get all that there as well. Plus, you also get a wonderful charter bus experience leaving Atlanta on that Saturday morning, September 4th, going to Charlotte there in the Queen City, watching the game there that day, spending the night in Charlotte that night, then coming back to Atlanta again on that Sunday. Hotel accommodations, as I said before, they're in Charlotte there that night. All of that for the VIP experience. One thing to be very, very clear on, though, it does not include tickets to the game. This does not include tickets to the game for either of these packages. Many of you, of course, already understand that. But for those of you that want a big experience in Charlotte ahead of that game against Clemson, this is an example of that. It is going to be a ton of fun. So here's what you need to do. Tickets are going to be limited, whether it's the tailgate only or the VIP experience there as well. You can go to DawgNation.com. You can find a link there at DawgNation.com. Go ahead and get in. Reserve your spot before they're gone, especially for the VIP version of this. That's the thing that's obviously more limited than the others. Big thanks to our sponsors for helping us keep the price at an appropriate level for all of this. It is going to be a ton of fun. Food, beverage, great tailgate, hanging out with each other, good-looking DawgNation Invasion t-shirt, taking over the city of Charlotte, getting ready for the Clemson Tigers. It's going to be a big deal. DawgNation.com. Reserve your spot for the tailgate only or the VIP package while those are available. Of course, big thanks to Kroger, The Finished Long Drink, Merriweather and Tharp, and R.S. Andrews for more details on that. If you have any more questions, anything that I didn't answer for you the way that I need to, if you go to the email address info@DawgNation.com, you can find out more about that there as well. Info@DawgNation.com, but go to DawgNation.com to order your tickets. Do you have any questions about that? Hopefully not. Hopefully I did a good job of answering that. This is going to be a ton of fun. Can't wait for it. DawgNation Invasion coming up in Charlotte. All right, we'll talk more about that before the show is done today. I want to get back to the conversation with the Georgia Bulldogs now, though. For everything happening for this team as it gets ready to move on to the upcoming season, no better voice to get some insight on that with than our buddy, Mr. College Football himself, Tony Barnhart. It's great to be able to welcome him back to DawgNation Daily, presented by Harrah's Cherokee Casino Resort. And I will say hello to Mr. Tony Barnhart right now, a guy that I always love talking college football with. And it seems like it's been a little while since we've done that here on DawgNation Daily, so we're happy to be able to do that today. Tony, welcome back to you. I know you're enjoying your summer, as you always do, and I'm sure you're much like me and the rest of this audience, also very much looking forward to the fall there as well. A college football season that feels a lot more normal, you hope, compared to what we dealt with back in 2020. Lots of examples of a lot of folks getting back to their normal routine here for the 2021 season, and that is certainly a great thing to be able to see, is it not?
It is, Brandon, and as I travel around to see different groups of people and talk about the season, there is an excitement about this season that I haven't seen in a long time. We're always excited when the season comes along, but yeah, I think the word is surreal. Yeah. After what we went through last year, the chance to come back and be something that looks more normal. People are genuinely excited about this season.
No, I think you're exactly right about that. And obviously there's a lot on the line for Georgia this year, a team that has, as good a chance as any to win the national championship, but also some lingering questions there as well. We talked about how Kirby Smart is perceived off the top of the show. Sporting News, the latest outlet to kind of come out with its ranking, and Smart always ranks in the top 10 on lists like this. And yet for some Georgia fans, I think 7th, according to the Sporting News. That's never quite high enough, given the fact that Smart does really well head-to-head against coaches that are ranked close to him or ahead of him on a list like this. And there seems to be this lingering perception that Smart hasn't fully proven himself yet as an on-field coach, as a tactician during the games. No one can dispute his management of the Georgia program, but the buttons you push during the game. What do you make of that, to the extent that that does seem to exist in the atmosphere around Georgia and Kirby Smart?
I thought he pushed the buttons pretty well in the Rose Bowl in 2017. Yeah. They stuck with their game plan, but even though they were Oklahoma was running up and down the field. Now, see, Brandon, I don't buy into any of this. It's a narrative where people hook onto it, and that's the thing about the media. They hook on the narrative sometimes, and the idea that, boy, this is the window for Kirby Smart, and if he doesn't win it this year, then the opportunity is going to pass by. I don't buy any of it. The idea of being a very successful head coach is to put your team on a consistent basis in the conversation. And Kirby Smart has absolutely done that. I don't know what's going to happen this year. I know that Georgia's good enough to win every single game they play. Will they? Guess what? We're going to find out.
Yeah, I think to further the conversation, I think one of the dangers sometimes is when a point gets oversimplified, and I think that Kirby Smart's been kind of put in this box. And admittedly, I've looked at some things from a similar vein there as well. Of, well, the one thing that seems to be different than Kirby and his team in comparison to Nick Saban or Dabo Swinney or even Ryan Day at Ohio State is this lack of explosive offense. And so therefore, I think there are some people that kind of view that Smart's either so far inability to transform this Georgia offense or hesitation to really join the trend that seems to be happening around him, that seems to be a cudgel that ends up getting used against Smart, that until this program at Georgia scoring 45 points a game, some people are going to assume that something about Smart's personality or his coaching prowess is the reason that's not happening.
I think those people that feel that way are really overthinking this. I get it down to the basics. Georgia was a top 10 team last season. If there had been a 12-team college football playoff, Georgia would have been in the playoffs. Now, were they happy with their offense when the quarterback play was inconsistent before J.T. Daniels got ready? Okay, sure. I would not argue that at all. But this idea that there's some sort of mental block that's keeping Georgia from realizing their potential, I just don't buy it.
When you look around at the Georgia situation here this year, I mean, it's kind of interesting that you saw a lot from J.T. Daniels a year ago, and yet it was a somewhat small sample size. You obviously had plenty of reason to think this Georgia wide receiving core could have a breakout year, and I think that remains true. The George Pickens injury from the spring is clearly a setback for all of that. I mean, Georgia probably does need to score more points to win a national championship. How set up do you think UGA is to be able to do that here this season?
Well, first of all, we'd love to have George Pickens. Okay,
right.
He is a difference maker. He stretches the field. He's a big play guy. But I look at the Georgia depth chart, and they're very good receivers on that. And now, to your point, does Georgia need to score more points? Yes, everybody needs to score more points. I sat in Nick Saban's office 4 years ago when he sort of laid out the idea of how they were going to have to score more points, and son of a gun, he hires Lane Kiffin. So every coach is going through this and realize, let's see, Alabama led the SEC in scoring defense last year. Mm-hmm. They gave up 19 points a game, okay? Nick Saban was asked if last year was his best team. He said, well, no, because my 2011 defense gave up 9 points a game.
Right.
But the game has changed, and coaches, Saban realized it, and he changed, and Kirby Smart's going to do the same.
I want to bounce around the rest of the SEC with you just for a minute while we have the time here. You mentioned Alabama. I do find it to be fascinating because, listen, they've had so much success and they've rebooted coaching staff, obviously player roster over and over again. But there is something, I think, interesting about the changeover this time, just given how successful Steve Sarkisian was as offensive coordinator a year ago. And Bill O'Brien comes in with as much credentials as anyone could. He was a former head coach in the NFL. It's a pretty big-time hire. It's the kind of hire most college programs couldn't make, credentials of a guy like O'Brien. And yet when I see how good Sarkisian was with Mac Jones and Devontae Smith a year ago, two players that are obviously gone there as well, I kind of wonder, is the transition to this new offensive coordinator going to be quite as seamless as it was from Lane Kiffin to Brian Dable and Brian Dable to Mike Locksley and Mike Locksley to Steve Sarkisian? Is it going to be quite so seamless this time around? What do you think about that?
I think it's going to rely on Bryce Young, his ability to go out and make plays. People forget Bryce Young was either the number 1 or number 2 high school quarterback in the country 2 years ago. And can he take a receiver like a John Mechie III and make him into the kind of – I don't know that John Mechie is another Devontae Smith. I'm not ready to say that, but he's a really good player, and they've got really good players there. But I think it really, Brandon, comes down to quarterback play. Mm-hmm. Now the game has changed to the point you cannot be just average at quarterback and win championships. You have got to be elite. And is Bryce Young ready to be an elite quarterback? We're going to find out.
I think that's really interesting. Do you think that Texas A&M is ready to take that next step to be mentioned alongside an Alabama, or is this the team that's more comfortable? You're more comfortable mentioning towards the middle of the pack of the SEC West? Are they separating themselves from the rest of this division based on what they've done during the offseason?
I think they're clearly number 2 ahead of LSU in the SEC West. People tell me the LSU is going to bounce back. Okay, I'll believe it when I see it. But the thing about Texas A&M is Jimbo Fisher has done what Saban has done, and that is to stack good recruiting classes on top of good recruiting classes. And it comes down to how they are going to play at the quarterback position. Their quarterback left after like his 9th year of eligibility, Kellen Mond, and now he's got a couple of very good athletic quarterbacks that he really likes. I think when all is said and done, Haynes King is going to be the guy, very athletic with a strong arm. How far along can Jimbo Fisher get this guy? And they got to be ready when Alabama comes to town later on this year.
Let me squeeze in 2 real quick things before I let you go, because I don't want to keep you too long. I want to be respectful of your time. But I'm fascinated by a couple of this league's first-year coaches. Brian Harsin at Auburn, that's a proven winner from Boise State, right? I mean, that's a guy that's performed at a very high level at the Group of 5. But I think one of the untold stories here is the fact that the Gus Malzahn era at Auburn is actually a little tougher to live up to than maybe some people give it credit for. He did beat Saban 3 times. He won the West as recently as 2017. Auburn was a pretty good team a couple of years ago. Recruiting has fallen off, but do you think that Brian Harsin is set up for success there at Auburn, and how quickly can he make folks forget about whatever was or wasn't happening during the Malzahn era?
Well, first of all, he did when he took over the job at Auburn, he did exactly what you should do coming from Boise State. He went out and hired Mike Bobo as his offensive coordinator and quarterback coach. He hired Derek Mason as his defensive coordinator, two men who have spent a lot of time in the SEC and who understand what SEC recruiting is all about. That's where you start. Now the question becomes, can Mike Bobo, who's developed some very good quarterbacks in his career, can he take Bo Nix and make him into a consistent SEC quarterback? Nix has talent. We all know that. But he is not consistent, particularly on the road. And can Mike Bobo do that? Auburn's got defenders. They're always going to have defenders, and they're going to be good. But the key is what Mike Bobo can do with Bo Nix.
So let me finish with this, and some people may say this is self-serving, but it is my genuine opinion. When I look at the situation with Tennessee and Josh Heupel, who's a first-year coach with the Vols, a previous head coach at UCF. This is not a guy that has a ton of experience, and he's stepping into what I think is a very challenging situation. Ton of transfer portal stuff, a relatively thin roster as it was. Tony, when I look at the situation for Tennessee this year, I think they have to be very careful not to be terrible. I'm talking about as bad as it gets. And for a fan base that's already wasted all of its patience on a lot of coaches who proved not to be worthy of that, I think there's a sense that the situation in Knoxville could actually be worse next year than it is right now.
Well, yes, because of where that roster is right now. Some of the holdovers from the Jeremy Pruitt era guys can play. Brandon, I've got them 5th at best in the SEC East.
Yeah.
Only South Carolina and Vanderbilt are ahead of them. Their roster is simply not anywhere close to where you want to be. We know what Josh Heupel wants to do. The question is does he have a quarterback in that room that can do it? And I don't think so. So this has got a chance. This year's got a chance to be pretty ugly. But Tennessee fans are going to have to understand they're basically starting over. under Josh Heupel with the new offensive philosophy, and you got to recruit players to run that offense. And I haven't seen any of the quarterbacks yet who I think can do it. Maybe they get better, but this is not going to be a good year for Tennessee.
Tony, I always love your insight, and I appreciate the fact that you share it with us here on the program. You're also sharing it online there as well. For people who want to get more of the stuff that you're doing, you mentioned some travels that you have right now and some of the insight that you're gaining from some of the visits you're taking. How can people get more of the work that you're doing?
Our website is under the SI.com umbrella, so it's SI.com/colleges/TMG. That stands for the media guides. Myself and a couple of my old newspaper buddies, we're in business together doing it. We cover college football a lot. We're writing about once a week, but that's where you can find my stuff.
Tony, I just
posted something today about NIL. So.
Well, there you go. I look forward to reading that and look forward to the new outlook that's on the horizon here. Thanks for your time, and we'll look forward to talking to you about that all very soon.
All right, Brandon. Always good to be with you.
Good stuff there from Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. A lot of fun. By the way, while I have your attention, speaking of having a lot of fun, also keep this in mind as we head towards the month of September. College nights are back at Truist Park with the Atlanta Braves. And this year, once again, the Atlanta Braves are inviting all Georgia fans to be a part of this. This always sells out really fast because the ticket package includes not just a ticket to the game there on September 30th against the Philadelphia Phillies, but also that really cool co-branded hat. Braves logo, UGA logo there on that there as well. That's the UGA ticket pack that you get for the game on September the 30th against the Philadelphia Phillies. So please make sure you check this out. Also, some really cool stuff here. $4 from every purchase there as well. It goes back to the UGA Atlanta Chapter Scholarship Fund. So that's a really cool thing there as well. Website to go to is braves.com/UGA. Braves.com/UGA for a lot more details on that.
This is SEC Through.
So really, really good stuff from Tony Barnhart. Really enjoyed that. And as Tony mentioned, you should check out his piece online about the onset of the name, image, likeness era that gets ready to get going. July 1st, be here tomorrow. So a lot of interesting stuff will kind of play out with all of that. And as we've said before, our position here on that is going to be we're just going to kind of sit back and watch it unfold here for a little bit. We'll experience some new things, some things we've never seen before. And just kind of see how it all plays out. And certainly for Tony, who's got great history of watching lots of changes unfold for the SEC over the years, certainly he'll have great insight on all of that there as well. Let's transition now. Let's do our SEC through. And I mentioned a moment ago where Kirby Smart ranks on the list for the Sporting News and its schedule. I'm going to the Sporting News and its list of top coaches. I'll do more on that coming up in a moment. I actually want to briefly talk about another list here just for a moment, though. CBSSports.com had a very interesting look at where strength of schedule ranks for the SEC for the upcoming year. And this is one of those things, if you're a Georgia fan, I think you absolutely have to take advantage of this. Because if you look at the pages of CBSSports.com and the story written here by our buddy Barrett Sallee, it says strength of schedule rankings for the upcoming year. And you have to scroll all the way down to the bottom to see Georgia, the 12th toughest schedule in the SEC, according to our buddy Barrett from CBSSports.com. And what you really see there is, and we've talked about this so much on the show the last couple of days, is that obviously you pay attention to a team like Arkansas coming into Athens, brings back a lot of starters from the previous year, and clearly everybody knows how tough that season opener is going to be against Clemson. The Florida game looms as big on October the 30th, just given the fact that it's a revenge game, and Florida's like the next best team on the Georgia schedule. But as Barrett, I believe, rightly points out, post Clemson, not only is Georgia a point spread favorite in every game that it plays the rest of the year, but as Barrett says, and this is true, there is at least some chance that Georgia could be a double-digit point spread favorite in every game the rest of the season. As it stands right now with the look-ahead lines, Georgia is not a double-digit favorite against Florida, and frankly not a double-digit favorite against Auburn, according to every book who's posted lines here thus far. But those are both possibilities once those games are played that Georgia could be that big of a favorite, that's substantial of a favorite. And that is a real weapon to have on your side. When you look at the great success for Kirby Smart during his era as coach, you point to a couple of years. 2017, when Georgia obviously won the SEC, do not discount how much it benefited Georgia to have an easier road in the SEC East. Florida was not very good in 2017. Tennessee was not good in 2017. Really no one was good in the SEC East in 2017. Georgia won all of those games against division foes that year by 14 or more points. Came back, did the same thing again there in 2018. Ultimately, the 2018 path didn't reward itself with a trip to the playoff, but Georgia was clearly on the doorstep of being able to do that and not being as challenged as much in its division as other SEC teams were, certainly in the SEC West. That's a real advantage. It's the kind of thing Georgia wants to take advantage of here this year. Now, on the one hand, some people were going to listen to that and look at that and say, well, I guess that must mean that that the Clemson game for Georgia to open the season must not matter all that much. And frankly, I think the statement about the Georgia schedule actually leads you to the opposite opinion, that when you know what you have after this, all the more reason to put the spotlight on that season opening game against Clemson, because the last thing you want to do, knowing you've got this schedule awaiting you after that, is to give away your margin for error so close to the beginning of the season. Now, let's face it, anything can still happen. Surprises can occur. Sometimes they do. But make no mistake, when you're thinking about all the reasons why Georgia ought to be considered a national championship contender, where its schedule ranks compared to a lot of the other SEC teams is a big part of this discussion. Let me go back near the top here for a moment, because I think there's a couple of other interesting things to bring up. Once again, it's interesting to see Arkansas, who last year I would say, short schedule, a little bit of a condensed year, kind of a weird circumstances, but they almost played the toughest schedule I'd ever seen any team play. It was crazy how tough the Arkansas schedule was all the way around. According to Barrett, they ranked number 1 on that list again for this year. Barrett also includes South Carolina on that list too. They obviously play Texas A&M as a kind of SEC West crossover type opponent. It was interesting to hear Tony Barnhart a moment ago discuss the bottom of the pecking order, the hierarchy in the SEC East, and that maybe Tennessee could hope to be better than South Carolina, but not very many other teams in the division. All of a sudden, you think about South Carolina having wins, hard to come by in a lot of places. A game like that against the Vols, where you have similar scenario, first-year coach. In a lot of ways, South Carolina, from a roster standpoint, may actually be set up better than Tennessee. I mean, Will Muschamp had some recruiting success in some respects. Pretty good defensive linemen. Gamecocks bring a lot of those guys back. Gamecocks also pretty good at running the football here this year there as well, but a tough schedule for a first-year coach in Shane Beamer. Then you get to another team that I mentioned with Tony Barnhart a moment ago, Auburn. Once again, Auburn seems to always show up on these lists of toughest schedules in the sport. That seems to be a fairly common occurrence for Auburn on some of that kind of stuff. And once again, this year, no different. It's the entirety of the SEC West. We know how difficult that division is. It's the crossover game against Georgia. That, as much as any reason, may be the chief evidence for why Gus Malzahn's no longer Auburn coach. Auburn has just struggled against Georgia, even predating Gus Malzahn. That's been a big issue for Auburn to deal with. And there's also the road trip non-conference against Penn State there as well. So that's a tough schedule for a first-year coach and Brian Harsin to inherit, but that's the situation awaiting him there. And by the way, as our SEC through kind of wraps up here, one more list to kind of circle back on here for a moment. I mentioned the coaches list, the top coaches, according to our buddy Bill Bender from the Sporting News. Bill, as I mentioned earlier, will be with us this afternoon on SEC Country Live. We'll talk more with him about where he ranks these guys. And, you see Dan Mullen is 8th on this list. That's behind Kirby Smart. That's a guy that last year kind of proved for Mullen whatever you wanted it to prove. Like, on the one hand, he took a guy in Kyle Trask, who I think many of us probably thought would never be a college starter, and he turned him into a more than a capable performer. He put up big numbers and was the talk of college football for much of last season. But Florida also lost 4 games there as well. Obviously, we pay a lot of attention to the Gators. We believe that good Georgia fans are Gator haters. I don't think there's any doubt that this year is a little bit of a swing year for Mullen. Whether it be the positive evidence from a year ago, what you did with Kyle Trask, the unique ways in which he used guys like Kadarius Toney and Kyle Pitts, does Mullen now do more with kind of less, right? I mean, this is a roster not as talented as Georgia's, not as talented as some of the other top teams in the SEC. Does Mullen find a way to do more with less? And if he does, then the next offseason could see Mullen even praise more as a coach. But if this is a little bit more of a return to kind of the pre-Kyle Trask world for Florida, where frankly, Mullen, who's supposed to be a quarterback whisperer, had a little bit of a hard time establishing his quarterback there. Emory Jones and whatever is expected for him, with Mullen not exactly praising Jones at the end of spring. All of a sudden, this could be one of those years that sets up Mullen to face more criticism next offseason than he's been used to. And then, as I said before, Jimbo Fisher ranking 5th on this list. It's a lot to ask a guy like that to go out and beat Alabama, beat your old boss Nick Saban, truly put Texas A&M in the SEC championship game 10 years into this league, something they have not been able to do as of yet. But obviously that would seem to be the next step. They're recruiting better as a way of trying to get that done, but still seemingly a little bit of a gap there with the Crimson Tide. But a lot of these lists of top coaches seem to be noticing the work that Fisher's doing there at Texas A&M, including Bill Bender from the Sporting News. We'll talk to him more about that on SEC Country Live later on today. And for now, we'll make that your SEC through. In just a moment, I want to have some fun with something that a Georgia player put out on Twitter. I thought this is just kind of funny. We'll do that coming up in a moment. First, though, let me tell you about my friends at secondchance.law. I love the work that they do, because they support people that I believe need support. Listen, I just like the idea of grace in life. I like the idea of getting a second chance to do better than you did the first time. That's one of those things I'm grateful that I've had in my life at certain times, and I'm happy to see that opportunity extended to others there as well. In some cases, this involves your criminal history. There are certain things that can just make it hard to get a job or hard to live where you want to live or things like that. But new laws in Georgia can actually make it possible to restrict some of that off your criminal history, but you got to know how the law works for you. That's what secondchance.law can do. They can explain all that to you. So you go online, secondchance.law, you answer their online quiz, and that'll help you determine your eligibility. And if you're not eligible, they can explain to you how you can become eligible. It's just a really cool thing all the way around. One of the partners is a longtime listener to DawgNation Daily, former Redcoat, which is obviously really cool. Double Dog, 2-time graduate of UGA. So you're supporting good dog people when you reach out to secondchance.law. So make sure you check them out today. All right, let me do this just really, really quick. We talked yesterday on the show about 2 Georgia offensive linemen, Jamari Salyer and Justin Schaefer, being mentioned as Pro Football Focus preseason All-Americans, and Schaefer got a lot of accolades. That was also noticed by his teammate Jamari Salyer, but for a slightly different reason. So Pro Football Focus puts out this graphic, and it's like 4 linemen looking like a football, helmet on, playing football. Justin Schaefer, helmet off, big smile, having some fun. Jamari Salyer asked Schaefer on Twitter why they have you wilding out, which is what the kids, would say. But clearly pretty funny. Let's zoom in if we can on the Schaefer face. Clearly Justin Schaefer, on the basis of that photo, enjoying himself as a preseason Pro Football Focus All-American, and kind of fun to see Jamari Salyer having some fun with Schaefer through all of that there as well. That's just a good thing to see, and obviously big expectations for both Salyer and Schaefer here for the upcoming season. So I hope that you will go to DawgNation.com and find out more about our DawgNation invasion, whether it be the VIP package that includes the hotel that night, the transportation and a wonderful chartered bus up to Charlotte. Of course, the tailgate there all day. There's TVs for the tailgate. There's all kinds of entertainment. You've done these tailgates with us before, many of you have, and they're just first class all the way around. Watching games, hanging out, having a good time. There's also the tailgate-only package. So if you're already going to be in Charlotte, you can get the tailgate-only package and have your food and beverage taken care of. The DawgNation Invasion t-shirt, which I think is a really pretty cool thing there as well. So DawgNation.com, website to go to. You can find out all about that, all the much more. And we certainly appreciate all of our sponsors for making that possible. But speaking of one of our sponsors, our buddy Jamie Kennedy says that he's tried one of those. He shows off the Finish Long drink. He's holding that up there. We'll give him a little golden shoe love for that. Jamie, thank you so much for that. Of course, Gatorhater Countdown, 122 days. We appreciate you being here. DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort, and we'll see all of you again tomorrow. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. A lot to do on the program today. Hopefully we got it all done. Looking forward to seeing as many of you as possible for our DawgNation invasion to Charlotte. What a great time that's going to be. By the way, Scott Green's already got his tickets. Listen, there's one thing I know, that if we're going to have some fun, do a big DawgNation event, guys like Scott Green are going to want to be a part of it. So, and it's also, by the way, one of the things that makes these events fun are people like Scott and his son that are just always a lot of fun to hang out with. So we always have a good time when we do these things. So much looking forward to seeing so many of the people who make Dog Nation so much fun. And in so many cases, that's all of you. It's not necessarily me. It's all of you. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Foster Moss brings up a good point. He says, wasn't it always strange how Kirby Smart dominated Gus Malzahn, but Gus Malzahn had so much success against Saban? And I do think that's kind of interesting because obviously that's the thing that Smart's still looking to achieve. There's a statement they always make in boxing that styles make fights. And for whatever reason, the style of Malzahn mixed with Saban seemed to sometimes work to Malzahn's advantage, whereas thus far in the Saban-Smart realm, that's the style made by that fight has seemed to kind of benefit Saban. But it is kind of interesting, the round robin there of, Kirby giving Malzahn everything he wanted and more. And in the case of Malzahn, he was able to do that to Saban. It is an interesting thing. Bank 6 says it isn't necessarily scoring more points or how we score points. We haven't had those explosive back-breaking touchdowns that break a defense mentally the way that Bama and LSU did the past couple of years. And I think the Bank 6 is mostly right about that. And this is that time of year that I'm watching more NBA than I typically do. And obviously this year I'm watching way more NBA just because of how good the Hawks have been. But to me, college football has come to resemble the NBA in one way, that in the playoffs, it seems like the thing that matters is, for just a lack of a better phrase, you better have a guy, championship teams probably have a couple of guys, you better have some dudes, at least a couple, for whom scoring is easy. If every basket is this production, if it takes a big offensive set just to find a basket, then you're just going to get pummeled in the playoffs, right? That ultimately this is about winning time, and it is about that kind of superstar mentality. And, it is about that guy who can just go to the front of the rim or obviously, hit from three or whatever else. But it's that kind of guy that just when it matters just sort of seems to be unguardable. And that's, Bank 6 describes this. There's this deflating sense of no matter what we do, this guy is just going to be a little bit better. I mean, ultimately, that's what seems to determine the NBA championship is that team that has one or two guys, they can just get to the front of the rim. They can just get there. They can just score easily. And the teams that don't score easy points are just going to eventually fall by the wayside in the playoffs. And the college football has become the same way. That it's nice to have smart coaches and it's great to have great game plans, but at a certain point in time, if you've got a receiver that can run past people, if you've got a running back that can run through people, if you've got this star player who just makes it look easy, this quarterback, who just puts it on the numbers, puts it on the money, just find a way to just make it easy, that is deflating. And I think those of us who are big time college football fans, we know what it feels like to be on the other end of that when you fight, scratch, and claw. You work your way. You finally get some points, and it feels great to do that. The other team just has this back-breaking 40-yard play, right there on the very next drive, and it just takes all the air out of the building when you're on the receiving end of that. But when you're the one that's doing that, that's the dream, right? And so I think in a lot of ways that's what I think Bank 6 is right about that. By the way, Foster Moss was at State Farm last night. Good times there. The atmosphere seemed crazy. I mean, it seemed, I hate all the talk of Atlanta sports curse and things like that. But last night, in so many ways, was just so much the antithesis, the exact opposite of what so many of us have endured for so long, where you just have bad luck befall you. I mean, last night was about making your own luck. I can only imagine what that must have been like, Foster, to experience that. What a great thing to see. And obviously, you hate to see the Giannis injury to go along with the injuries the Hawks have dealt with there as well. But Foster mentioned the countdown for Giannis while he was shooting free throws. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt that kind of got into Giannis's head. I mean, I think that's an example of the crowd. I mean, he airballed a free throw again last night. He did that in Game 3 as well. I don't think there's any doubt that the crowd has had an impact on the series from the Atlanta side of things, in particular when it comes to Giannis for sure. G. Greg's Bama boy hating per usual. Brent Hickman asked about Feinbaum on Monday. I think he means on Mike's show. I've actually been saving this. We're going to do some Feinbaum stuff from Mike's show at a certain point this week. I've just been kind of saving it. So that is definitely coming on the show this week. Sometimes you have to bank some content. So we have banked that content here just a little bit, but we're going to get to that for sure. Braided pass management going in on Manny Diaz. Obviously the Miami coach, not the Georgia tennis coach. There are a lot of guys now who have the same name. It's kind of amazing. You got two Manny Diaz's, you got two Scott Stricklands. We were kind of joking the other day that the new LSU baseball coach is Jay Johnson. Jay Johnson was a one-time, different guy, but same name, one-time offensive analyst at Georgia. I think he went on to become Mel Tucker's offensive coordinator at Colorado. I don't know if he fell into Michigan State or not. I just don't remember that. But there's just a lot of guys now who seem to have the same name. Thomas Van Santa says, go buy your fireworks before they run out. Yeah, this is I love Independence Day. I mean, listen, I'm a true patriot, so I love Independence Day. I love celebrating our nation's birthday. But I have to admit something. I'm a little bit of a Scrooge when it comes to the onslaught of fireworks. It seems to last for many, many days. This is a true story. The house next to mine, way before I lived there, I'm not kidding. This is not like the thing that your dad told you about the BB gun and putting your eye out. This actually happened. The house next to mine, in a previous generation before I lived there, because of fireworks, burned to the ground. You would never be able to tell it now because it's been rebuilt. But the house burned to the ground because of fireworks. So I am not a huge fan of the amateur firework displays. I like professionals. I like to watch the professionals do it. Some of these amateurs with the fireworks make me nervous, though. Crow King 123 says the 3rd is my birthday. That's cool. My late grandmother's birthday was also July 3rd there as well. Crow King 123 says he's going to be partying in Panama. There's no doubt that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm assuming you mean the Florida Gulf Coast and not Central America, but either way, I hope you have a great time. Let me check in on Facebook here for a moment there as well. Good to see Bill Sanders, Dana Turk checking in on the show today. Matt Rukavina and Philip Jordan Willis having some fun with each other. Shelton Tucker in here stirring up trouble as per usual. Actually, I haven't seen Shelton in a while. Steve Highland says that Kirby being ranked 7th is a joke. The only thing they got right in that poll was at the 1 spot. Yeah, I mean, my issue with the real ranking is, and I said this in the radio this morning, I make a Wednesday appearance with our friends at Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref. There's such a clear and obvious offensive bias going on here. And the other thing that seems to also be true is that Kirby seems to suffer from his proximity to Nick Saban. In other words, guys like Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley rank ahead of Smart. I mean, these are young coaches. These are coaches without national championships. What is their reason for being ranked ahead of Kirby Smart? I mean, I think there's two things you draw from that conclusion. They are scoring a lot more points per game. There's just always going to be a bias in favor of that. And this is not to bang on Bill Bender, who I like. Bill's ranking really not that much different than some of the other coaching rankings that are out there. But there's a bias in favor of offensive output. Kirby suffers from that a little bit. But more importantly, I think, you'll say, well, Ryan Day's made more playoff appearances. But how much of that is because he plays in a league, the Big Ten, that does not include Alabama? Or the same thing for Lincoln Riley, who plays in a league in the Big 12 that year in and year out is even actually less deep than the Big 10 is. There's less depth in the Big 12 than there is the Big 10. That it just becomes easier to have a path to the playoff, to make multiple appearances, and therefore rank fairly high on lists like this, just because you're several hundred more miles away from Tuscaloosa, Alabama, whereas Georgia really does, for the moment at least, exist in that shadow until Georgia gets out from underneath that. It's one of the reasons why I like the idea of expanding to a 12-team playoff, is that all of a sudden now, while you're waiting to overtake Alabama, and certainly Georgia fans hope that eventually happens, but while you're waiting for that to occur, you've got other ways you can measure yourself. 2018, Georgia would have been a playoff team, would have had a chance to host a playoff game, and all of a sudden there you could say, well, Georgia made the national semifinals. They won a quarterfinal game. They made the semifinals, and that would have felt like a real accomplishment, right? Same thing in 2019 there as well. Georgia got beat up pretty bad by LSU, but maybe Georgia could have returned the favor, beating up on some lesser team in the college football playoff. And all of a sudden, that bad taste could have been taken out of their mouth. That, to the extent that you see any restlessness whatsoever from Georgia fans, it's obviously related to the fact that it legitimately has been a long time since Georgia won the national championship. No one denies that. But as Kirby Smart clearly has gotten Georgia closer than it had been in quite some time before he took this job, it's actually measuring that incremental progress that becomes tough. And that's where I believe the restlessness from Georgia fans actually comes from. All right, let's see what else. Brandon Griffin checks in to say how many coaches have been leading Saban late in the last 3 matchups. Sweeney gets 1 win. Everybody loves him. Kirby's a great coach. He'll get that national championship. It is fair to point out that Dabo Swinney's actually beaten Nick Saban twice. So when it comes to Dabo as a coach, multiple head-to-head wins against Nick Saban is a pretty valuable commodity for him to have there. And so I can't really dispute Dabo right now, but we haven't seen the Dabo-Kirby matchup head-to-head. But to Dabo's credit, he's actually beaten Nick Saban more than once, 2 different quarterbacks as well. So that's a credit to Dabo Swinney. And just to be completely fair, the fact that Georgia did have those halftime leads against Alabama and ultimately lost those games, I think actually is a data point that gets used against Kirby Smart. I mean, go back and listen to the Paul Feinbaum audio from earlier in the show. You get kind of an example of that it, I think, unfortunately feeds into the narrative of, well, Georgia's got the talent to get it done, but can Kirby be the kind of coach that gets it done? I think that's unfair. Most of you do there as well, but not holding on to halftime leads ends up, just to be completely honest, used as a data point against Smart more so than a data point in favor of Smart. By the way, something I haven't mentioned in the SEC through the last couple of days, but it's worth mentioning. The championship series for the College World Series between Mississippi State and Vanderbilt has actually turned out to be really good. Vandy dominated game 1. Mississippi State came back, got the win last night. Cool to see Dak Prescott in maroon supporting the Bulldogs there. And you come down to a third game tonight. I believe Kumar Rocker's on the mound for Vandy, so that's a tough thing to deal with if you're the MSU on this. But my rooting interest will be on the side of Mississippi State here for this one. That's turned out to be a really good series in the wake of some controversy of the weekend. These 2 teams doing their part, trying to make you forget about that. Demarius Franklin envisioning the idea of a new NCAA video game, wishing it was there right now with JT Daniels on the cover. Yeah, that'd be a fun thing to be able to see. Trey Droughty looking forward to a DawgNation invasion to Jacksonville. I think my bosses would say, let's just do one invasion at a time. I think that's what they would say. Let me go back over to YouTube just for a moment. We'll do a couple more comments. Let's see what else is going on. Nature Gator. Let's find out what Nature Gator's got, what he's selling today. He says, Georgia's playing its scheduled SEC rotation plus Clemson. UGA is clearly willing to play anyone any year. UGA will have future very tough SEC schedules, how it works year to year. And nice to hear Nature saying that. And it is interesting this year that, listen, scheduling and rotations are to a degree about luck. And not only does this kind of work out for Georgia to be a schedule that on paper looks more manageable than maybe some have in the past, this is also one of those years in which, in addition to Georgia playing a manageable schedule, Florida plays a tough schedule this year, at least, when it comes to their SEC games, tougher than maybe sometimes it has been in the past. They always play LSU, but now it's the Alabama game there as well. So Florida has dealt a tough hand from both of its SEC West games here this year. Josh Grafton, thank you for the kind words. That really means a lot to me. I very much appreciate that. Very much appreciate that. Jeremy Howard says that Alabama's strength of schedule is like 376th. That's very funny. Sean Daly, did I see Ray Fulcher, the former UGA grad assistant under Coach Richt, had his Opry debut on Friday. I did see that, and that is a really cool thing to be able to see. I mean, a lot of you obviously are aware that my dad passed away back in December, and so his song that gets a lot of airplay, with good reason here in the state about, his dad calling him and giving him the voicemail with the love you son, go Dogs. You have no idea how much that song means to me. I mean, and listen, you don't have to have a dad that recently passed away to feel that way, but I just love that song, and it's just the kind of thing that I just can't listen to enough. It just really feels very personal for me, and a lot of you feel the same way. So, yeah, to see a Georgia guy like this having that success, I mean, it's just kind of cool to see, at the Grand Ole Opry anyway, and he's got some new music out. I just am so happy for him, so proud for that, and really I feel a debt of gratitude to Ray for the song that he's recently written, because it just means the world to me, for sure. Christy, thanks for checking in, appreciate that. Jalen Jackson says, how much fun is this Hawks run? Yeah, it's as much fun as I've had in a while. It really is. The Braves in the playoffs last year got to be really fun for a while because they were really mowing folks down there, for a moment, and really gave the Dodgers a good run for their money, something that going into the series you probably couldn't have foreseen. So it's been nice, but this Hawks thing even more off the radar than that. I mean, you've gone from them being in the what we call the Delete Eight a year ago to now being one of the final 4 teams left. And listen, when the Hawks were like in the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time a few years ago, that was back when, I'm not as big of an NBA fan now as I was even as recently as then. My kids are getting a little older, so I don't have time to watch sports outside of college football the way that I once did. But, that was a team that I was like watching all the time. I used to go to Hawks games all the time before my kids started, getting into everything they're, getting into. And unfortunately, when the Hawks got to that Eastern Conference Finals, they didn't win a game once they got there. Kyle Korver was hurt, and it was just over, right? I mean, the run had just come to an end. They couldn't do anything with LeBron. They were, having to force to pack the paint to stop him, and they couldn't get out to defend the three, and Bud's substitution patterns were nonsensical. The whole thing was just a disaster. And now to think, not only are you back in the Eastern Conference Finals, someone no one could predict it, but they are 2-2. I mean, there's a very legitimate chance, especially with the Giannis injury, which you never would have wished, but it has happened. It's a fact of life. There is a very real chance that Atlanta could go to the NBA Finals. And beyond that, I mean, it is not an impossible task to say that Atlanta could bring home the Larry O'Brien trophy. This is crazy. It is crazy. It is so much fun to watch. And it's just incredible entertainment. Let's see what else. Doug Rayburn said, did the Bucks lose Giannis to injury? I guess we don't know the full extent of this yet, but there is certainly some very, very significant concern. It was crazy. Last night he comes back on the bench, and then I think he had to be removed from the bench. I mean, the video is one of those like replays that you show it once and then you show it again, then you realize you don't need to show it anymore. It was that really bad hyperextension thing, kind of that gross-looking hyperextension. I guess there's a way that sometimes these things end up not being as serious as you think they can be. We said this before with like bone bruise stuff. Of course, that's ironically what Trey's dealing with. But sometimes a bone bruise injury in football looks terrible when it happens because the player just falls down in a heap. But sometimes ends up not being as serious as the initial reaction to the injury looked like. The Giannis thing, I almost wonder if it wasn't the exact opposite of that. It almost kind of reminded me of when Boss Bailey tore his ACL, and I'm not diagnosing the injury, please understand that. But when Boss Bailey tore his ACL back when he was at Georgia, and he kind of walked off the field, and it sort of seemed like everything was fine, then come to find out it was actually worse than it appeared. I almost wondered if the Giannis thing, because he was actually walking on his own power a little bit last night, I was almost left to wonder, is this actually worse than it looks? Because Giannis was either totally in shock or downplaying or whatever else, but I sort of get the impression that the actual injury is going to end up being worse than his body language last night kind of indicated. Philip Jordan Wells says he'll have an MRI today, so we'll find out more about that. Jamie Huff says Hawks are up 3-1 if Trey doesn't get hurt. Yeah, they would have had a very good chance of winning Game 3. All right, we're going to get ready to go here. Very, very quick. Anything else? Crow King 123 says if Bama played more homes and home, he wouldn't have anything to say about their schedule. That's coming for Bama, right? I mean, Georgia's added those. Alabama has followed suit by adding some of those there as well. Within a few years, we're talking about these big SEC teams playing these big non-conference series there as well. All right. Josh Grafton says the last Hawks conference championship conference championship home game win was in 1959. That is really amazing. That's really amazing. It's been really something to see. Really something to see, and a really bright future ahead for that team. So if you read the Atlanta Journal-Constitution online at ajc.com, you can get more great coverage of the game from last night. Very, very interesting stuff there. Also, continue to follow the story of the Atlanta Braves there as well. Not certainly as good news, big picture with the re-injury to Mike Soroka and everything that's happened there, but Atlanta trying to keep pace with the Mets in the National League East, so good coverage of the Braves there online. Atlanta Journal-Constitution at ajc.com. We don't really do the politics thing on the show. We never will. I shouldn't say we don't. We completely avoid that at all costs. It is interesting, and you should read this up. I mean, we are getting pretty close, it would seem, to a Herschel Walker candidacy for the United States Senate. And listen, even with it being Herschel, we're still not really talking about that on the show, just because one of the things that some of you will come up to me and say from time to time is, BA, I'm so glad you don't talk politics on your show. Thank you for avoiding that at all costs. And it's just my agreement with all of you, right? It's like, that's just not what you want this to be. So even when you have the Herschel Walker thing, we're going to try to stay as far away from that as we can, but it is a story. It is out there, and there is good reporting on that today of what Walker has in front of him as he gets seemingly closer to announcing a candidacy for the United States Senate. So that's at ajc.com there too. And you should read that and stay up to date on all of that. Thank you for being here. Check out the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Big thanks to R.S. Andrews making this possible, or R.S. Andrews Cool Down. Check them out for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, and electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised, the price that's promised. You should find them today. My friends at rsandrews.com. Hope you will check them out. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. DawgNation Daily, presented by Harris Cherokee Casino Resort. We'll look forward to talking to you then, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.